Hello and welcome to our third lesson on quadratic functions. This time we're doing horizontal shifts or translations. And I've already done the warm-up exercise here. If you don't know how to do this, please just go back to the original lesson. Alright, and now we're going to crack into part 2, or question 2. So the same as any other of these questions, we're just going to do a table of values. And make sure we use bedmass. So if I put -2 in here for x, the right side is going to equal -5 squared, which is 25. So y is going to have to equal 25 to make that true. If I put in -1, I get -4 squared is 16 on the right, so y would have to be 16. 0, I'm going to get 9, 4, and 1. So let's throw those on the graph. Well, the first two aren't even going to fit. So I've got 0, 9. I've got 1, 4, and 2, 1. And this does not look like a parabola. It does look like the numbers keep getting bigger as we go to the left, though, so there's no point in putting in any more negative numbers. So let's see what happens if we put in 3. 3 is going to give me 0 squared, 0. And if I put in 4, 4 is going to give me 1 squared, which is 1. And 5 is going to give me 2 squared, which is 4. And if I were to put in 6, that's going to give me 3 squared, 9. So as promised, we've got a horizontal translation. So our vertex has moved right 3. So that's going to be at 3, 0. Axis of symmetry is going to be the line x equals 3. We're opening up. X is real. Range y is greater than or equal to 0. And we have a min of y equals 0 at x equals 3. Okay, let's just stop and think about this for a second. So we've got x minus 3 squared. Okay, in all of our other parabolas we've done previously, we've had just y equals x squared. Oops. So our vertex was at 0 when x was 0. Because if we go either way from 0 squared, we're going to get the same thing. If I get negative 1 squared and 1 squared are the same thing. Well, in this case, this is my 0 squared, because if I put in x equals 3, I get 3 minus 3 is 0. So that's why my vertex is here at x equals 3. And then if I go either way, this is -1, or this is 1 squared, or this one's -1 squared. This one's 1 squared. They're the same. This one's -2 squared, this one's 2 squared. They're the same. So our axis of symmetry and our vertex are always going to happen at 0 squared. In this case, x equals 3 at 0 squared. So for question 3, let's use this idea of 0 squared to do a better job on our table of values. So hopefully everybody can see that if I put in x equals -2, that'll give me 0 squared. So let's put that in the middle as my vertex. Go -3, -4, -1, and 0. So if I put in -2, that gives me 0 squared, 0. Put in -3, the right side will be -1 squared, 1. 4, that's going to be a 1, that's going to be a 4. So -2, 0. Okay, so in this case we've got a horizontal translation of 2 left, which means our vertex is going to be -2, 0. Axis of symmetry, x equals -2, still opening up. Still any x is alright. X is real. Range is still 0 and up. And we have a minimum of y equals 0 at x equals -2. Okay, question 4. Let's do some predictions. Alright, so this negative here is going to tell me that we're opening down. Because it's a -1, we're not going to have any vertical expansion or compression. Our vertex is going to be at 0 squared, so that's going to be at 0. And then when x equals 0, y is going to equal 3, which means we've got a vertical translation of up 3 and no horizontal translation. Okay, our next guy, because we've got a positive 1 out here, we'll be opening up with a regular shape. And to get 0 squared, x is going to have to equal -3. And when x equals -3, y will be -2. Which means that we'll have a horizontal translation of 3 to the left and a vertical translation of 2 down. Okay, next guy, we've got a positive 2 here. So we're going to be opening up with a vertical expansion of 2. And to get to get 0 squared, x is going to have to equal 4. And when we have 0 squared here, that's 0 times 2, y will just be 0. So we'll have a horizontal translation of 4 to the right and no vertical translation. Last guy, positive 1/4. So because it's positive, we're opening up. Because it's a quarter, we'll have a vertical compression of 1/4. And at 0 squared, x has to be 2, which makes this whole thing 0, which means that y is going to be -7. So we'll have a horizontal translation of 2 to the right and a vertical translation of 7 down. Remember, anytime you're looking at these, it's just important to look for 0 squared. Once you do that, pretty much everything else falls into place. Okay, question 5. We're going to predict this and then graph it. So the -1 here tells us that we're going to have a normal shape opening down. And to get our vertex, 0 squared is going to happen when x equals -1 and y equals 2. So we're going to have a horizontal translation of 1 left and a vertical translation of up 2. Alright, let's graph it and see whether or not we're right. Alright, and here's our parabola. Notice that the first thing I did was find our vertex, which we already did above, and made sure I put that in the middle of my table of values. And then I just made sure I used order of operations. So there's our parabola. And now we need to find the vertex, which we already know is -1, 2. Axis of symmetry. There's our mirror line at x equals -1. We're opening down. Domain. Any x. Range. Y is less than or equal to 2, because we've got all the y's from 2 down. And this time we've got the top of a hill, so we've got a maximum of y equals 2 at x equals -1. Alright, so question 7 asks us for a parabola that has x-intercepts of -1 and 5 and has a maximum y value of 3. So maximum y value is going to be there at 3. Okay, so the first thing we should realize is that our axis of symmetry is going to be exactly halfway between our two x-intercepts, which is going to put it at x equals 2. So our vertex is going to be right here at 2, 3. There's our parabola. So we've almost got the equation. We know it's going to be y equals, we don't know what our vertical stretch factor A is going to be. If our vertex is going to be at 0 squared, this is going to have to be at x minus 2 squared, so that when we put the 2 in, we'll get 0. And then we've got a vertical translation of up 3, so we go plus 3 there. Okay, to figure out what a is, we can just take either of our intercepts. Let's choose -1, 0 right there and fire it into our equation. So we get 0 equals -1 minus 2 is -3 squared, 9. So 9a plus 3. Oops, that's not over minus 3, that's just minus 3. So I get -3 equals 9a divided by 9, and a equals -1/3. Perfect. So here's our equation. Y equals -1/3 x minus 2 squared plus 3.